The Roman Empire had a formula for breaking people. They'd perfected it over centuries. Iron, fire, beasts, time. The mathematics of suffering, calculated to the hour, to the scream. But in the summer of 177 AD, in a city called Lugdunum, they met a problem they couldn't solve. A teenage slave girl. Her name was Blandina. And what happened to her would make even her executioners confess something they'd never admitted before. Lugdunum, modern-day Lyon, France, was no backwater. It was the beating heart of Roman Gaul, a city of merchants, soldiers, and sophisticates who worshipped the same gods their fathers had worshipped, and their fathers before them. Christianity had crept in quietly, carried by Greek immigrants from Asia Minor. At first, the Romans didn't care. Let the foreigners pray to whatever invisible god they wanted. But then the whispers started. The Christians met in secret. They spoke of eating flesh and drinking blood. They called each other brother and sister, and then disappeared behind closed doors together. The accusations spread like wildfire. Cannibalism, incest, a cult plotting against the emperor himself. When the arrests began, the Romans expected the usual: confessions, recantations, begging for mercy. What they got was Blandina. The authorities had a strategy: start with the weakest link. Blandina was a slave, property, not a person, small, frail. Her own mistress, also a Christian, wept when she saw the girl taken away. Surely she wouldn't last an hour. The torturers went to work at dawn. They used every instrument in their arsenal: the rack, the whip, the heated irons. They demanded she confess to the crimes Christians were accused of. They demanded she renounce her faith. And here's where the story takes its first turn. The torturers worked in shifts. One team would exhaust themselves and another would take over, hour after hour. Dawn stretched into afternoon. Afternoon bled into evening. And Blandina spoke only 7 words. I am a Christian, and nothing wicked is done among us. That's it. The same sentence, over and over, her voice steady, her body destroyed, but her spirit untouched. When the sun finally set, the torturers stopped, not because they showed mercy, because they had nothing left to give. The contemporary account records their confession. They admitted they were baffled. They had no other torture they could apply to her. A team of professional torturers, men who had broken soldiers, rebels, and criminals, defeated by a teenage slave girl. But Rome wasn't finished. If they couldn't break her in private, they'd break her in public. They threw Blandina into the amphitheater during the summer games. 20,000 spectators, hungry for blood. They tied her to a wooden stake, her arms stretched out, deliberately posed to mock the crucifixion of her god. Then they released the beasts: lions, bears, wolves, animals starved for days, driven mad by the scent of blood. And here's where the story defies everything the Romans understood about power. The animals circled, they paced, they growled, but they didn't touch her, not one. Blandina hung there, praying out loud, not for herself, but for the people watching, for the guards, for her torturers, for the crowd screaming for her death. The spectators fell silent. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was something they couldn't explain. She was dragged back to prison, broken in body, but somehow more alive than ever. For the next several days, the Romans made her watch. They brought her to the arena daily to witness her fellow Christians being torn apart, burned alive, gored by animals. They thought watching others die would finally shatter her resolve. Instead, she became their strength. She stood among the condemned, calling out encouragement, reminding them of the resurrection, telling them death wasn't the end, it was the doorway. Christians who had wavered found their courage again. Those who had denied their faith recanted their denials and joined the martyrs. The Romans had created exactly what they feared most: a symbol, On the last day of the games, they brought Blandina back one final time. Beside her stood Ponticus, a 15-year-old boy, the youngest of the condemned. For hours, the Romans tortured them both, still hoping, demanding that they would break. Swear allegiance to the gods of Rome. Just say the words and live. Ponticus looked to Blandina. She spoke to him quietly, steadily. We don't know exactly what she said, but we know what he did. He endured every torture, and he died without denying his faith. Then Blandina was alone, the last Christian standing. They scourged her. They placed her on a red-hot iron chair, her flesh searing. They enclosed her in a net and threw her before a wild bull. The animal gored her, threw her into the air, again. And here is the detail that the Roman chroniclers couldn't comprehend, the detail that haunted them enough to write it down. Blandina showed no sign of feeling what was happening to her. Not performance, not defiance, something beyond their understanding. The spectators, the same crowd that had come for blood sport, called for mercy. They begged the executioners to end her suffering. She was finally killed with a gladiator's sword. The Romans burned her body. They burned the bodies of all 48 martyrs. They ground the bones to ash and scattered them into the Rhone River. Let's see them rise now, they mocked. Let's see their God save them from our hands. But here's what Rome didn't anticipate. Within 2 generations, Christianity would spread across Gaul faster than ever before. The very persecution designed to eradicate the faith became its greatest recruitment tool. The pagans who witnessed Blandina's death admitted something that shook them. Never had they known a woman to endure so many and so terrible tortures, and that admission traveled. It reached the churches of Asia Minor. It reached Rome itself. It was copied, preserved, and passed down through centuries. 1800 years later, you can still visit the amphitheater in Lyon, where Blandina died. There's a memorial marker there now. The arena that once echoed with calls for her blood now bears her name. The empire that tried to unmake her, gone. The faith she refused to abandon, still here. And the question her life still asks, the question Rome never could answer. What do you do when the weakest person in the room turns out to be the strongest? They called her small, frail, despised, a slave who owned nothing, not even herself. But in the end, it was the empire that knelt. Blandina of Lyon, the unbroken,